That is a haunted hotel up there, gang. In fact, that is a haunted place that you're looking at. We are in Jerome, Arizona. And pretty famous place. Actually, we are at the cemetery in Jerome. Sometimes called back then the Hogback Cemetery. And this is pretty intriguing place. A lot of old graves. Now, a lot of people here in Jerome died violent deaths. So we're going to talk about it as we roam the cemetery. Have not scouted this out yet, but it looks really intriguing. I'm going to tell you a little bit of history on Jerome. And let's just go see what we can find here. A lot of wrought iron cage graves, if you want to call it that, or cribs. Yeah, they said this town, well, it was a copper mining town. And this place is said to hold the distinct title of being the largest ghost town in America. Here in Jerome, they began a massive copper mining camp, and with that, it became a fast-growing boom town. Look at these. There's an inscription on a metal cross over there. Let's take a look at that. At the time, this actually was the second largest city in Arizona. We're going back to the late 1800s. When this place was established. Let's see here, it says NATO. And I see the words Italia. Look at that. See if I can zoom in on that for you. Yeah, you can see here across the valley is the town of Jerome over there. It's a deep valley. Some very interesting buildings as I look out over in this direction. Look at that up there. See if I can maneuver this for you. Wonder what that was. Historic place. It's an interesting grave here. See a creepy baby. Well, it is Halloween. Oh, look at someone's been doing something here. Maybe a little ritual, or no, maybe a baby and the candle. Very interesting. Let's backtrack a little bit back to this main road. Tell you a little bit more about this place. As in other boom towns of the day, this place very similar. A little more dangerous though because of all the mining activities, but interestingly this town burned down 4 times in a matter of just a few years. The whole business district and everything made of wood, but they would build it right back up again. And of course, like the towns, the tombstones and all the rest, it was wild and crazy. With all the drinking, prostitution, gambling, violence, all the prostitution, right? The ladies of the night, the soiled doves. They did boast about their respectability, though. You know, this was a respectable place, even though all that was going on. I mean, they did have a Masonic lodge, a temple. They had 2 brokerage houses selling shares of mining stock. They had a couple of opera houses. They even had 3 bowling alleys. And with that, 86 saloons with those ladies of the night. PB. PB, you just gotta wonder. So that's like a footstone, and there's a headstone there, totally illegible. Let's go up that away. There was one famous soil dove here. Her name was Midge, and she worked for a Belgian woman who was famous here named Jenny Bouters. And it is said that when Midge was busy, Jenny would give the waiting men more whiskey until Midge could accommodate them. That same Jenny Bouters, who ran into the street during one of the fires, offered the firemen favors for life if they saved her little building there. Please, please, save my little den here, and you can come every night and have your way with any soil dove that you would like. Let's take a look at this inscription over here. You know, you got to believe that there are a lot of other graves here. Let me come around from this side, actually. There we go. Get a better look here. Looks like Richard Harvey, 1869 to 1912. Wonder who he was. It's a pretty haunting place. Could you imagine coming here at night? No siree, Bob. And you got to watch where you step here. Snakes, scorpions. But the cactus, that'll really do you in. You know, that jumping cactus, I already had a couple of experiences with that. That was no fun. Look at this up here. It's fun to explore this with you guys. Another inscription. Now there looks like there's a detail. I'm going to try and zoom in on that for you so we can all read that. Hold on. Gravesite by son and wife Raul and Lupe Carrera, and that shows the descendants. Restored by the grandsons. Very nice. So people are still coming here caring for this place. My oh my, look at the view in the background here. I'm kind of at the high point of the cemetery here. So unfortunately, many of these sporting ladies, Midge included, they met disastrous ends by way of murder. And that's why they say that this place is filled with wandering spirits, all these violent deaths I'm going to talk about a little bit. And like all the other boom towns, this place would not last. I mean, by the 1950s, it pretty much went from like 15,000 people all the way down to only 100. Now, of course, it's bustling again. It's a tourist place. I haven't checked out the town yet, but I drove through it. It looks pretty cool. Definitely recommend checking it out. So if you look at the historical records here, particularly the death certificates, you're going to find numerous fatal mining accidents. people falling down mine shafts, having limbs blown off or burned off, skulls smashed by boulders, accidental electrocutions, cave-ins, carbon monoxide poisoning, and much more. They had one mine blast here that I couldn't believe it when I was researching this. 260,000 pounds dynamite. I think it was six. If you were to take 6 train loads, boxcars full, and like set it all off at once, it probably was like Mount St. Helens blowing the side of the mountain off, I would imagine. A number of people died with that. If you look deeper into the records, you'll find more death certificates. You will find the people that were killed by gunshot wounds, gunfights, all kinds of knife wounds, strangulations. This was a crazy place. You can only imagine. Well, let's go back and look at a couple of stories that exemplify this boomtown, this mining town. And let's start by going back to talk about what happened to Jenny. Well, Jenny did leave this place finally. She arrived at a place called Gold Road in August of 1903. Gold Road's between Kingman and Oatman, Arizona. It was the Acme mining camp with the bawdy houses and the saloons situated between the road and a section of town called the Badlands. And that's where she was. She established her saloon with 2 large tents in the back to serve as rooms for her working girls. Now at this time she was not alone. She was now with a man named Clement C. Lay. He joined her from Jerome. He followed her. He claimed to be her husband, but more likely he was an opportunist who wished to part Jenny with her money. Now, Clement was drinking early on the morning of September 3rd, 1905. He was running off at the mouth about how he needed money to settle a debt, and he intended to take it from Jenny even if it killed him. And the more he drank, the meaner and louder he got. And when he got drunk enough, he headed over to Jenny's house, pistol in hand. At Jenny's, this man, Clement, he kicked her door open and demanded cash. She said, "No way." And they started arguing. And then everybody started to mill about. It was getting louder and louder. Jenny ran out. She had had enough, and she was in fear for her life. She was wearing only her nightgown. She made it about 40 feet before this guy, Clement, shot her. He shot her in the hip, and she fell to the ground. She said, "For God's sake, don't shoot." Well, those were her last words. Clement shot Jenny twice more. She rubbed and grabbed her eyes and fists as if to pray. She clenched her fists, and she made the sign of the cross as this Clement went to reload. And not one person attempted to help her. They all just stood and watched. Clement yelled out, "You aren't dead yet?" as she lay there. He then unloaded a shot into her head. He was finally satisfied that she was dead, so he decided that he was going to commit suicide, so he tried to shoot himself in the chest. And then he laid down and he crossed his arms, placed his hat over his face, and he waited to die. But he didn't die. And Constable Fred Brown came over and he hauled the murderer off to jail over in Kingman. And there he had to await trial. Now, Clement was confident that he would be found not guilty for the murder of Jenny Bowders, and witnesses described him as the calmest person in the room on that day. Well, that was the day of his sentencing because he was found guilty. Now, during his jail time, Clement bragged that he would welcome the day he was hanged, and he put this false brave face on. But on January 18th, 1907, they read him his signed death warrant. Clement was overcome with the realization he would die that very day. All of a sudden, he wasn't so brave anymore. Clement became physically weak as officers led him through the halls to the gallows. His legs gave out beneath him. He fell. They were dragging him along. His head actually hit on a jagged edge of a jail cell. He was bleeding all over the place, partly conscious, as guards carried this coward up the gallows steps and placed the noose around his neck. Well, the trapdoor was opened as it was planned at 2 p.m., and it was at that point that Clement C. Lay dropped to his death. Another story which is very, very interesting that I found when I was in town, if you stop by a place called the Firefly Gallery, this building was originally known as Otto's Place. It was a saloon, and one of the many saloons, and it was also a bowling alley, one of the bowling alleys I had mentioned. In the basement, you can still go there. You can still see the escape route used during Prohibition, as well as the original entrance to the saloon. But it was upstairs where Otto's nephew, a Walter Vogel, was shot to death. Many, many of these gunfights. Well, from the book Ghosts of Cleopatra Hill by Herbert V. Young, there's one take on the story. There were 3 takes we could find, but this take had indicated that, well, actually, I'll read it for you. The short chapter is called The Killing of Walter C. Vogel. An incident talked of for many a day occurred when Dave Schreiber, a tough miner with a record for misdeeds, who had sought refuge in the isolation of this mining camp, tangled with a young barkeeper named Walter Vogel, who worked for an uncle, Hank Vogel, owner of a saloon between the Fashion and the Bartlett Hotel. He had come off shift one afternoon in a foul mood after a fight with his shift boss. He had come off second best and had been fired. He had warned the boss that he would kill him, and he meant to keep his promise. He stopped in his room at the Montana Hotel, washed the blood from his face, then took a pistol from his valise and concealed it under his coat. Downtown he entered the Fashion and had a drink, and waited for the shift boss, who was usually stopping there for a beer on his way home. The boss didn't show, and Schreiber went looking for him at Vogel's. Young Vogel was behind the bar. As well as being a bully, Schreiber was a cadger and found no welcome when he demanded whiskey. But a drink was poured. "Leave the bottle on the bar," Schreiber ordered. "No more till you've paid your bill," Walter said. Well, it was then that Schreiber reached across the bar, gathered in a handful of Vogel's shirt, and struck him in the face. Well, the bartender reached for a gun he kept under the bar, and as he came up with it, Schreiber shot him through the heart. And the miner glared around at a few other men in the saloon. All were frozen to their stools or chairs. He hurried up to the hotel and stuffed his few belongings in his valise. In the meantime, Johnny Hudgens, who had been down the hill disarming a couple of ladies at the Cuban Queen's house who were trying to carve each other up with butcher knives, received word of the killing and followed Schreiber up to the hotel. Ed Kermier, the hotel manager, was tending the desk. "You know where Schreiber is?" Johnny asked. "Right behind you," Schreiber's voice called from the stairway, and as Johnny pivoted, a gun in each hand, Schreiber started shooting. A bullet struck the deputy high in the shoulder. Well, that made Johnny mad. He didn't like anyone to shoot at him, as he had so thoroughly demonstrated during his stay in Jerome, and he liked it less that he should be hit. So he emptied both guns at Schreiber, whose guns went off twice more harmlessly before he crumpled and rolled down the stairs. He was dead on arrival at the bottom. Said Johnny fired 9 shots from the automatic and 6 from his revolver, said the old-timer. One shot must have missed, for they only found 14 holes in his body. It's another stone. I'll zoom in on this. We can't get close to them, of course, because they're in these cages, these fenced. I see it starts with an S, but I can't really read it. Perhaps you can read it with the imaging we have. Lots of bad things. So, you know, you go up there and there are a lot of haunted hotels, all kinds of haunted places here. I think I remember reading about the Asylum restaurant, the clubhouse on Hill Street, the surgeon's house. Imagine the surgeon's house, that's got to be good. The ruins of the Montana Hotel. A lot of good ghost stories. Now, as you look around this cemetery, you know, how many graves would you say are here? Well, if I were to count, you know, I'm going to say there's probably 40, 50, I don't know, let's just say there's 100, but from what I understand, there's over 1,000 people buried here, so, you know, the ground we're standing on, we're walking on graves. But what's interesting is, if you look into the records, more than 9,000 people died here. Many in violent ways. So where are they? Well, they said a lot of them, like during the influenza outbreak, they just brought them to the smelter. Cremated dust to the wind. Just imagine. Bodies stacking up upon bodies. Take them to the smelter. Throw them in. And then forget about them. They said there were a lot of people here from different countries. I mean, it could go on, from immigrants from England, Ireland, Croatia, Spain, of course, Mexico. But there were people from China, Italy, France, Poland, north in Canada to Sweden, Yugoslavia, and Germany. All attracted for the mining. Could make a lot of money. Could make a lot of money. People would get severe burns from that smelter and die there, not just the bodies thrown in. You could fall down a mine shaft. You could inhale carbonic acid. What else could go wrong? Well, you could have both your legs amputated, which would cause an immediate death. Or you could have your skull fractured, like I mentioned before. You could have your body burned. Or you could get accidentally crushed under logs in the mine, or electrocution, or run over by a train. Why not get run over by a slag motor? Or how about that powder explosion? Or you could suffocate. Or you could get murdered. Get shot or stabbed, have your throat cut. And then there are the diseases. Smallpox, yellow fever, influenza, tuberculosis. Throw in a little syphilis. No, let's talk a lot of syphilis with what was going on here. The soiled doves, right? Pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. A lot of people came and went here. Definitely come here. I'm going to go check out the town right now. And maybe come back here with Britain. Maybe we'll do some ghost hunting. But we'll end it right here at this grave. The grave with our Savior, Jesus Christ. See you soon, folks.